What's going on, everybody? It's Mike back at you with part 4 of the Gospelchops drum video series. We're going to be finishing off the worksheet today. Before we get started, I just want to wish a sincere thank you to everybody checking out this channel, all the subscribers, everyone who's liking and leaving positive feedback as well as constructive feedback. It all really helps push the channel forward, and the feedback really helps me better gear what I should be making videos for based on what you guys want to see. So please continue to do that. And for any of you that are new here, please hit that subscribe button and turn the notification bell on so you'll be notified as soon as I drop a new video. Now, without further ado, let's get into this fill. I'm going to start with breaking down the fill itself. Essentially, the sticking is very much the forefront of this fill, and it is very important. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later during the variation section. Again, this video is going to be broken up into chapters like part 2 and 3. But essentially you have a series of 6s, and then you have 5s, and then you have a couple 3s, just kind of similar to the other fill. But what I mean by that is it's a combination of your hands and feet. So you have the number, like 6 on the hands, and then 1 on the foot, 5 on the hands, 1 on the foot, that sort of thing. So I'm going to show you very slowly what's going on. To start with, you basically have this. And again, this is with no accents or ghost notes. We're going to get to that in a sec. That's just 6 on the hands. And then you have 5 on the hands and 1 on the foot. Except this time it's... So you have a right-left, so a single. Whereas the first one, you basically just have a double. And beat 1 is essentially a 6-stroke roll, which we're going to get to that as well. So those two together now, beat 1 and 2. And beat 3 is 3 on the hands, followed by 1 on the foot. Followed by 2 more on the hands with the double. And then beat 4 is simply on the snare, with that middle note being the E is a rest, and the and of 4 is basically the kick drum. And again, we're going to talk about how to play with that afterwards. So it's 4 and and just like that. So when you put it all together, it's basically like this. So the one thing I want to mention is a lot of you are already probably wondering, well, can I just play this with singles? And the answer is absolutely yes, you can. But I've thought of a few reasons for myself why I would actually prefer to play it like this with a mixture of doubles and singles. I find not only does it flow better, but it also allows you to do a lot more when it comes to, using variations and moving things around the kit as opposed to just having it all in the snare like we're doing right now. And I'm going to, get to that very shortly. The next thing I want to talk about was the ghosts and the accents. So at the bottom of the page, I'll take this opportunity to explain these notes. You'll notice that there's 2 asterisks, and at the top of the staff here, you have 2 asterisks. So that's basically just telling you where you see the 2 stars is what it's referring to. So where you see the 2 stars is optional, meaning that those 2 left ghost notes are optional. So you could play them as just regular volume, or you could have them as ghost notes. That's just going to add more dynamics to the fill and what have you. The other thing that I didn't mention on the other video that I discovered, and this was my mistake for not including it, the other part of the notes where it says 1 star, and it points to the other fill that we did on the last video, which has 1 star over top of where there's that left and right, which, if you recall, we were talking about the difference between ending with your right or ending with your left on that floor tom. If you ended with your right, it would be a double right, and if you ended with your left, it would cross over. Now, what they've actually suggested, even though both of those methods work, if you must have the floor tom as the last note of the fill, and you come back to tom 1 with your left hand, which is essentially if you're playing the fill continuously or repeating it as they mentioned in the worksheet. And that would sound a little bit something like this. So it just kind of basically repeats just before on beat 4, that little kind of, you're basically just doing that twice now instead of having the floor tom variation. Just like that. Now to jump back into the fill for this video, I'm going to play it for you slowly with the ghost notes and the accents in there. And it really helps emphasize the 6-stroke roll, and it kind of helps keep things in time when you're playing it very fast. I'll demonstrate that in a second. So what I do for the accents is I actually use the rim shot as the accent. And again, it would just depend on whatever your main playing volume is. The ghosts would be below that, and your accents would be above that. So just something to keep in mind. Normally, my snare hits somewhere around there. Rim shot would be there, and my ghost notes would be there. And that's that. Now the ghost notes are a little bit challenging at first. It really just takes a lot of control to try and switch from, because you just have a kick drum in between there, right? So it is challenging to do that sort of freehand with your left hand, especially if you're right-handed. But one thing that's good to keep in mind if you do have to practice that, and shout out to my longtime mentor on the drums as well as life, Matt McFarland, for explaining this to me. But this is one of those instances where you might want to just zoom in on this part of the fill and just practice that. There's no need to play through the whole fill every time when it's really only that one part that's giving you trouble, because you're wasting time, first of all, and second of all the other parts you're already good at are going to get better and better, and that part you're not good at is still going to kind of be trying to catch up behind. So what I would do is just grab beat 3 and just play that over and over again, or with a little bit of a pause. And also add beat 4, that snare as well, which is also an accent. And that in itself could be used as a cool fill. One thing's for sure, before you even mess with the doubles or the accents, just play through the whole fill without it and just get comfortable with the sticking. That's what I did, and I found that that just helped sort of build up the familiarity with what's actually going on, and then you could deal with all of the little nuances and flourishes after. The first thing I want to talk about in terms of variations is moving around the kit. And this is going to help explain what I mentioned earlier about why it's important to kind of play this as it's written with the doubles instead of doing it as singles. For example, the first variation I would do is just move the right hand every right to the floor tom. Right, now if I was playing singles, it just wouldn't work that way, right? I'd have to sort of try to figure out another variation, which is cool too. But the other thing you could do is, you know, sort of build it into a groove and, you know, start adding open hats and things of that nature. Again, it's optional if you want to do the ghost notes or not. As it gets faster, you start to blur the lines between that. Another variation is 6/8. If you start playing a 6/8 groove, you would basically just take beat 1, beat 2, and beat 3. Obviously, because that would be your 3/4 notes. So 3 out of the 4 is the same as 6 out of the 8. So, and again, for those of you that aren't familiar with what I mean by that, just drop a comment if you guys would like a video on theory, because that's a whole other topic. But just for you, those of you that do know, that's what's going on notation-wise. So you would basically just play it as so. And that would be the end of the bar. So I'll give you a demonstration with 6. Another thing you can do as well is add some notes. So when you finish the bar, you can add something on the which is a really cool way to do it. And that could be just the floor tom, that could be just a crash cymbal. I'll demonstrate that for you right now. So that gives you a bit of an idea. Just adds a little bit of a blip because it's literally the 16th note triplet just before the next bar. And again, you can play around with this, right? Just make it your own. The next thing I want to talk about is flams. You can go about it a couple ways, but one way that I found is pretty cool is sort of just every write on every quarter note is going to be a flam. And I'll demonstrate that for you right now. Now, when it comes to practicing the flams, a great book to look to is Stick Control, because in the later pages, when you get into the flams, there's a lot of exercises that help get comfortable with doubles followed directly after flams or vice versa, like so. And that's a lot of what that ends up becoming if you do that with that fill. Another thing I wanted to discuss is taking pieces from the fill, just like we did the last time. First thing I want to talk about is the 6-stroke roll, of course, at the beginning. I'm sure most of you noticed. Classic way to build off of 4-fill. Classic rudiment, rather, to build off of 4-fill. Just keep repeating beat 1, right? Lead-in works as a fill, works as a solo. There's just so many applications for it. One that I personally like a lot with this is actually just having the left hand be over here and then everything else on the snare. The single left, I mean. Something like that. Another thing you can do is add some pieces or sort of take an idea and just extend the rest of the bar like that. So really cool example is instead of basically playing the fill as is, after beat 3, essentially I'm just going with a kick after. So that's another really cool thing you can do is basically just repeat one part of the fill, sort of like freeze it, and then just keep that going for the rest of the bar. So I'm doing basically at beat 3, that right, left, left, and just that kick over and over again until the bar's done. It's a bit of like a syncopated polyrhythm type feel because you're basically playing a group of 4 over and over again over essentially what's phrased as 6s. So it sounds a little bit strange. It kind of appears that it's going over the meter a little bit, but it really fits in the same way. So you could play the fill normally once and then that way once. Cool. Lastly, again, I want to talk about this in a groove context. So you already heard a little bit of the grooves I was doing. I was doing some stuff in 6. I was doing some stuff in halftime shuffle, all that goodness. But a lot of it really works in so many different contexts. Again, if you play the groove, the entire fill slowly with just sort of a more funky groove, it sounds great too. That last kick as well could be a snare instead if it matches the context better, right? So there, instead of the kick on the of 4, I basically just had a flam. So what I did there was basically having just a, halftime groove and basically playing the fill in double time. So they would be 30-second note triplets at that point. Another cool variation is every accent essentially becomes an open hat. And again, just playing it like you're playing a groove, right hand on the hi-hat, left hand on the snare. So check this out. So basically on every right accent, I'm doing an open hat, a quick open hat. And that last right hand, I'm doing a nice long one. So it sounds a little bit something like this altogether. A little faster.